The moment my father slapped my hand away from the serving dish, the room went silent in a way that felt rehearsed. "Don't touch that," he said, sharp and final. "That's for your sister." I froze, fingers still hovering over the spoon heat rushing to my face. For half a second, I honestly thought he was joking. It was Sunday night. His house. The same dining table I'd sat at my entire childhood. Roast chicken in the center, mashed potatoes steaming, the smell of rosemary and butter thick in the air. I looked up at him, waiting for the punchline. "There's nothing else," I said quietly. My mother didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on her plate, carefully cutting her chicken into perfect, even pieces like precision could erase what had just happened. My sister smiled. Not a wide smile, not a cruel one. Just a small, satisfied curve of the lips, the kind you make when you know the rules of the game and someone else still thinks it's fair. "Dad's right," she said, lifting her fork. "You should have eaten before you came." I was 32 years old, sitting at my parents' dining table being told I didn't get dinner. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was quieter than that, like a hairline fracture you don't notice until the bone gives way later. I pulled my hand back, slowly rested it in my lap, and nodded. "Okay," I said. But inside my chest, a question began to echo, growing louder with every beat of my heart. When did I stop being their daughter? If you had asked anyone outside that house, they would have told you I was the responsible one, the dependable one, the daughter who never caused trouble. I moved out early, paid my own way through school, took the first job offer I could get instead of chasing dreams. I showed up for birthdays. I remembered anniversaries. I sent cards with handwritten notes because my mother liked that sort of thing. My sister stayed. She stayed in my parents' orbit like a planet that knew exactly how much gravity she could get away with. She married young, divorced fast, moved back home with excuses that changed every year. There was always something fragile about her life that needed protecting, something temporary that somehow lasted forever. At the table, she talked about her week, her voice animated, confident, a new idea, a new plan, a new problem someone else would solve. My father leaned toward her, nodding, engaged. "That's smart," he said. "You've always been good with people." I watched him say it, remembered how he'd once told me I was too quiet to matter. The chicken sat between us like a line drawn in blood. She helped herself to seconds, then thirds. My stomach growled loud enough that my mother finally glanced up. "You want some bread?" she asked, as if offering charity. "I'm fine," I said. It was a lie, but it was a familiar one. As they talked, my mind drifted backward to the 1,000 tiny moments that suddenly rearranged themselves into a pattern I could no longer ignore. The forgotten birthdays. The way my accomplishments were acknowledged with silence while my sister's mistakes were framed as brave risks. The way my father always found a reason to side with her even when logic didn't. I had told myself it wasn't intentional. Families were complicated. Parents were human. Love wasn't a pie with limited slices. That night, staring at an empty plate, I realized something colder and harder. Love wasn't limited. It was selective. After dinner, my sister stood and stretched, satisfied. "I'm exhausted," she said. "Big day tomorrow." My father smiled. "You should rest. You've got a lot on your shoulders." I stood too, pushing my chair back carefully. "I should go." My mother looked relieved. "Drive safe." No one asked if I was okay. No one noticed I hadn't eaten. No one cared. In the driveway, the air was sharp with early winter cold. I sat in my car for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, breath fogging the windshield. My phone buzzed. A message from my sister. "Don't take it personally. Dad's just stressed. You know how he is." I laughed out loud. The sound surprised me. It wasn't humor. It was disbelief. Because for the first time I saw the truth with brutal clarity. This wasn't about stress, or misunderstandings, or bad timing. This was about hierarchy, and I was no longer on the list. As I drove home, a different memory surfaced. My grandmother's voice years earlier whispering something she thought I was too young to understand. Something about the will, about the family business, about how things would make sense someday. That night, lying in bed with my stomach still empty, I made a quiet promise to myself. If they were going to erase me from the table, I would make sure they understood the cost of exclusion. I didn't want revenge then, not consciously. I wanted answers. But answers have a way of becoming weapons when the truth finally shows itself. And the truth was already moving quietly beneath the surface of everything I thought I knew. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's hands snapping my wrist away from the serving dish. Not hard enough to leave a mark, just firm enough to make a point, just public enough to humiliate. By 6 in the morning, I gave up. I made coffee black, no sugar, and sat at my kitchen counter staring at the city outside my window. My apartment was small, but mine. I paid for it myself, every inch of it. That used to make me proud. That morning it just made me tired. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. "Did you get home okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Yes. 3 letters. Safe, neutral, non-confrontational. The language I'd been fluent in my entire life. I went to work as usual. The office smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. Monday meetings, small talk, deadlines. My coworkers talked about Thanksgiving plans, Christmas travel, family dinners. Family. The word scraped something raw inside me. Around noon, my manager stopped by my desk. "You okay?" he asked. "You seem distracted." "I'm fine," I said automatically. Another lie, but this one had teeth. That afternoon, I found myself doing something I hadn't planned. I opened an old email folder labeled Grandma. I hadn't looked at it in years. After she passed, I'd archived everything, telling myself it was healthier not to linger. Scrolling through her messages felt like opening a window in a house that had been sealed too long. Her words were warm, observant, careful. She asked about my job, my health, my plans. She asked questions no one else ever did. Then I found it. An email sent a few months before she died. "I don't know how things will turn out with your parents, but I need you to remember this. You were never invisible to me. What you do with that truth will matter someday." I felt my throat tighten. At the bottom of the email, something I had missed before caught my eye. A forwarded message chain. Legal language. Attachments I had never opened. I downloaded them. The documents weren't easy to understand, but one word appeared again and again. Will. My heart began to race. I wasn't stupid. I knew families fought over inheritances. I knew favoritism didn't end with childhood. But something about the timing, the secrecy, the way my grandmother had looked at me during our last Christmas together, suddenly made sense in a way that made my skin prickle. I took the rest of the day off. By evening, I was sitting in my apartment with printed pages spread across the table. I read them slowly, carefully, like every sentence might explode if handled wrong. My grandmother was the original owner of the family business, a regional distribution company that my father now ran. On paper, he was the president. In reality, she had built it from nothing while raising 3 children and burying 1 husband. The will outlined something else, a contingency. If certain conditions were met, ownership would not default entirely to my father. It would be divided, and my name was there, not as a token, not as an afterthought. As a beneficiary with decision rights, I leaned back in my chair, breath shallow. This wasn't about dinner, the chicken, the plate. This was about control. I thought about my sister, the way she had smiled, the confidence, the ease, the assumption that the table belonged to her. Had she known? The thought made my stomach turn. The next few days passed in a blur. I went to work. I answered emails. I returned my mother's calls with polite distance. My sister texted occasionally, casual, breezy, as if nothing had happened. "We should do lunch sometime." "Miss you." I didn't respond. Instead, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Her office was quiet, neutral, intentionally unwelcoming. She was in her early 40s, sharp eyes, calm voice. She listened without interrupting as I laid everything out. The dinner, the documents, my grandmother. When I finished, she folded her hands. "You understand," she said carefully, "that if this is valid, your father has been operating the company under incomplete disclosure." I swallowed. What does that mean? It means she said that the power dynamic you think you're reacting to may be built on a lie. The word landed hard. Lie. I left her office with a folder thicker than when I arrived, and a weight in my chest that felt both terrifying and grounding. That night my father called. "I hear you left early the other day," he said. His tone was clipped formal, businesslike. "I did." A pause. "Your sister told me you were upset." I laughed quietly. Of course she did. "You need to stop being so sensitive," he said. "Families have roles. You've always understood that." That was it. The sentence that broke something open. Whose role was it to be hungry, I asked. Silence. Then colder. "Don't be dramatic." I closed my eyes. "You didn't even notice." Another pause, longer this time. "You should apologize," he said finally. "You made your sister uncomfortable." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From clarity. They weren't confused. They weren't careless. They were deliberate. Over the next week, pieces fell into place. Conversations replayed themselves with new meaning. Compliments that had never come. Doors that had quietly closed. Invitations that stopped arriving. I had spent my life trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant to include me. And now I understood why. Whatever my grandmother had planned, it threatened the order my parents had carefully protected. I wasn't just unwanted. I was inconvenient. On Sunday evening, my mother called again. "We're having dinner," she said. "You should come." I imagined the table, the food, the silence. "I can't," I said. "I have plans." She hesitated. "With who?" "With myself." I hung up before she could respond. Standing alone in my kitchen, I looked at the documents spread before me and felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not anger, resolve. They had pushed me away from the table. They had no idea what I was about to bring back with me. The first thing I learned about power was that it rarely announces itself. It hides in routine, in habits, in the way people assume you will always behave the same way you always have. The week after I declined my mother's dinner invitation, the silence from my family grew thick and deliberate. No calls, no messages, no casual check-ins disguised as concern. It felt like a test, a waiting game to see who would blink first. I didn't. Instead, I spent my evenings reading. Not novels, not news, documents, emails, old financial reports my grandmother had quietly forwarded years ago with notes like, "You might want to understand this someday." At the time, I had skimmed them, overwhelmed, uninterested. I trusted my father. I believed in family. Now I read everything. Patterns emerged quickly once I knew what to look for. Transfers timed around holidays, decisions made just before deadlines, signatures that appeared consistent until you compared them closely. My grandmother hadn't just built the company, she had tried to protect it. From my father. The realization left me cold. On Thursday afternoon, my lawyer called. "I reviewed the documents you sent," she said. "Your grandmother was careful, very careful." I sat on my couch, notebook, open pen ready. Careful how she created a conditional structure. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was about behavior. My stomach tightened. Whose behavior? Your father's. And anyone acting on his behalf. I closed my eyes. The room felt smaller. "There's more," she continued. "If certain clauses were violated, control could shift without his consent." "Has that happened?" She paused. "I think it might have." That night, I dreamed of my grandmother for the first time in years. She was standing in her old kitchen sleeves, rolled up flour on her hands. She looked at me with the same steady gaze she always had. "Pay attention," she said. "They never do." I woke before dawn, heart pounding. At work, I kept my head down. I did my job. I smiled when required. But beneath the surface, something had changed. I was no longer waiting for permission. I was gathering leverage. Friday evening, my sister finally called. "I don't know why you're doing this," she said, skipping pleasantries. "Mom's been crying." I leaned against my kitchen counter phone pressed to my ear. "Doing what?" "Acting like a victim," she snapped. "You always do this." I almost laughed. I didn't get dinner. "Oh my God," she said. "Are you still on that?" It wasn't about the food. Then what was it she demanded? I pictured her at my parents' house, feet up on the couch, wine in hand, secure in her position. "Control," I said. "And you know it." She scoffed. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Silence. Then her tone shifted. "Dad's under a lot of pressure. The business isn't as stable as you think." My grip tightened. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "Just a fraction too long." "I shouldn't have said that," she muttered. "No," I said calmly. "You shouldn't have assumed I didn't know." Another pause, longer now. "You need to stay out of this," she said. "You don't understand how things work." That was the second time that week someone had told me I didn't belong. I ended the call without another word. Saturday morning, I visited the cemetery. The air was cold, the ground still damp from overnight rain. I stood in front of my grandmother's headstone, hands shoved deep in my coat pockets. "They think I'm weak," I said aloud. "They always have." The wind moved through the trees like a quiet answer. "I won't burn it down," I continued. "But I won't let them erase me either." I left flowers, simple ones. She never liked extravagance. By Monday, my lawyer had confirmed what I already suspected. There were discrepancies. Enough to raise questions. Enough to justify a formal review. Enough to scare people who had something to hide. The call from my father came that evening. "We need to talk," he said. No greeting, no warmth. About what I asked. "You know exactly what he said. This nonsense you're stirring up." I pictured him in his office walls lined with framed certificates bearing his name. Achievements built on someone else's foundation. "I'm not stirring anything," I said. "I'm asking questions." "You don't get to," he snapped. "According to whom?" His breath caught, just for a moment. "This is family business," he said. "That's funny," I replied. "You've spent years telling me I wasn't part of it." Silence stretched between us. "You think you're clever," he said finally, "but you're not built for this." I smiled. He couldn't see it, but I felt it all the same. "You're right," I said. "I wasn't built for this." I hung up before he could respond. I was built to survive. That night, I laid everything out on my kitchen table. Timelines, names, transactions. Every small injustice suddenly aligned into something much larger. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about exposure. And exposure has a way of forcing the truth into the light, whether people are ready or not. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, my phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." I stared at the screen, pulse steady, mind clear. For the first time, they were afraid. The message stayed on my phone like a bruise you keep pressing just to make sure it still hurts. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." No name, no explanation, just a threat wrapped in certainty. I didn't reply. Silence had always been my family's favorite weapon. I was done handing it to them. Instead, I forwarded the message to my lawyer. Her response came less than 5 minutes later. "Do not engage. Screenshot everything. This is useful. Useful." The words settled something inside me. For years, my instincts had told me something was wrong, and for years I'd been taught to doubt myself. Now every reaction from my family only confirmed what I already knew. People don't threaten you when they have nothing to lose. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself. Nothing fancy, pasta, olive oil, garlic. As I ate, I thought about how absurd it was that feeding myself felt like an act of rebellion. At 9, my mother called. "You've upset your father?" she said, voice tight with accusation. "I didn't raise my voice," I replied. "I didn't accuse him of anything. That's not the point." I leaned back in my chair. "Then what is—" She sighed, the sound heavy with years of practiced disappointment. "Why are you doing this now?" I looked around my kitchen. The quiet, the control, the absence of judgment. "Because I finally noticed," I said. "Noticed what?" "That I only matter when I'm convenient." Her breath hitched. "That's not true." "It is," I said gently. "You just don't want to say it out loud." She lowered her voice. "Your sister needs stability." "And I don't," I asked. "She's more vulnerable." I closed my eyes. There it was, the justification dressed up as concern. "When did I stop being your child?" I asked. She didn't answer. After we hung up, I sat very still, not sad, not angry, just awake. The next morning, I received an email from the company's legal department. A routine update, they called it. A notice of an internal audit scheduled for the end of the quarter. I smiled. My lawyer hadn't wasted time. At work, I struggled to focus. Every email notification sent a small jolt through me. I half expected my father to show up in the lobby, red-faced, demanding I stop whatever game he thought I was playing. He didn't. Instead, my sister appeared at my apartment that night. I hadn't told her my address had changed, which meant she'd gone through my parents to get it. The thought made my skin crawl. She knocked like she owned the place. I opened the door and found her standing there, perfectly put together. Hair smooth, coat expensive, eyes sharp. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked through my apartment, slowly taking everything in. The modest furniture, the clean lines, the life I had built without them. "So," she said, turning to face me, "what do you think you're doing?" I crossed my arms. "Living." She scoffed. "Don't play innocent. You're poking at things you don't understand." "I understand exclusion," I said. "I've had a lot of practice." Her eyes flashed. "You've always been dramatic." I laughed, short and humorless. "You ate my dinner." Her jaw tightened. "That was Dad's call." "And you didn't stop him." She shrugged. "It wasn't my place." That was the lie she always hid behind. "You know about Grandma's will," I said. Her face went still. "Do I?" she asked carefully. "Yes," I said. "You do." She exhaled slowly, then smiled. But this time the smile didn't reach her eyes. "You always did think you were smarter than you are," she said. "Dad handled all of that." "No," I replied. "He handled what he wanted you to see." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you keep this up, you're going to hurt people." "Which people?" I asked. "You, Dad, or the truth?" Her expression hardened. "You don't belong in this story." I met her gaze without flinching. "Neither did you. You just stayed long enough to rewrite it." She stared at me for a long moment, then laughed softly. "You really think you can win?" "I'm not trying to win," I said. "I'm trying to be counted." She shook her head, disgusted. "You always needed validation." "No," I corrected. "I needed fairness." She turned toward the door. "This ends badly," she said. "For you." "Funny," I replied. "That's what people say when they're losing control." After she left, my apartment felt charged, like something irreversible had just happened. I checked my phone. Another message from the unknown number. "This is your last warning." I didn't feel fear. I felt anticipation, because now I knew something else. They weren't just hiding the past. They were terrified of the future. And the audit was only the beginning. Fear has a smell. I noticed it the first time my father avoided my eyes at a family gathering years ago. I didn't understand it then. I mistook it for irritation, authority, disappointment. Now I recognized it instantly. It was in the way my sister's voice tightened when she warned me. In the anonymous messages that escalated from vague threats to ultimatums. In the sudden stiff politeness of emails from the company that had once ignored me entirely. Fear doesn't show itself when people are winning. It shows up when they sense the ground shifting beneath them. 2 days after my sister stormed out of my apartment, my lawyer called again. "They're scrambling," she said without preamble. I sat at my desk at work, door closed, pulse quickening. "How can you tell?" "There's movement," she said, "paperwork being filed out of sequence, meetings scheduled and canceled within hours. They're trying to clean something before it's inspected." "Does it matter?" "Yes," she said calmly, "because panic leads to mistakes." That night, I received an invitation I hadn't seen in years. "Family dinner, Sunday. Your father wants everyone there." No apology, no explanation, just expectation. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Of course he did. They needed me back at the table. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I opened my grandmother's old notebook, the one she used to keep tucked into her purse. I'd found it in a box my mother had given me after the funeral, saying, "I thought you might want this." I don't think she knew what it contained. Inside were handwritten notes, names, dates, observations that felt casual on the surface and surgical underneath. Trust actions, not words. Watch who panics. Silence is information. I closed the notebook and smiled. Sunday came faster than I expected. I dressed carefully. Neutral colors. Nothing that suggested weakness or aggression. I wasn't going there to perform. I was going there to observe. The house looked the same. White siding, trim hedges, the illusion of order intact. Inside the table was set fully this time. Plates for everyone, my plate included. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father stood when I entered. "You came," he said as if surprised. "I was invited," I replied. My mother hovered nearby, hands fluttering uselessly. My sister sat already, posture stiff, eyes calculating. Dinner began with forced normalcy. Small talk, weather, a neighbor's renovation, every sentence carefully chosen to avoid landmines. Halfway through the meal, my father cleared his throat. "We need to talk as a family," he said. There it was. I set my fork down. About what? He glanced at my mother, then my sister, then back at me. About misunderstandings. My sister jumped in. "You've been distant. We're worried." I nodded. Funny, I didn't get that impression. My father's jaw tightened. "There's no need to be hostile." "I'm not hostile," I said. "I'm attentive." He leaned forward. "You've been asking questions you shouldn't." "About my grandmother's will," I asked. "Or the business." The room went very still. My mother gasped softly. My sister froze. My father's voice dropped. "That's private." "So was my place at this table," I said. "Until you decided it wasn't." "You're being emotional," my sister snapped. I turned to her. "You knew." Her lips parted, then pressed together. "About the will," I continued. "About the conditions. About why Dad needed me quiet." She stood abruptly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," I said. "And so do you." My father slammed his hand on the table. Plates rattled. "That's enough," he barked. "This ends now." I met his gaze steadily. "It doesn't." "You think you have leverage?" He said. "You don't." I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. He stared at it. "You built your authority on the assumption that I wouldn't look," I said. "You underestimated me." My mother began to cry. "You're tearing this family apart," she sobbed. I softened my voice. "No, I'm showing you where it's already broken." My father stood chair scraping loudly. "Get out." I rose too, gladly. As I walked to the door, my sister called after me. "You think this makes you powerful?" I turned back. "No," I said, "it makes me free." Outside, the air felt cleaner, lighter. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A new message, different number this time. "We can fix this, let's talk." I deleted it without responding. Because I finally understood something my grandmother had tried to teach me all along. When people who denied you a seat suddenly offer you one, it's not generosity. It's desperation. And desperation makes people dangerous. Power doesn't collapse all at once. It fractures first. The Monday after that dinner, my father didn't call. Neither did my mother. The silence felt different this time. It wasn't punishment, it was calculation. At work, I received an email marked confidential. Subject line, request for statement. The internal audit had officially begun. I forwarded it to my lawyer before I even finished reading. Her reply came quickly. "This is good. Answer honestly. Say less than you think you should." I took a long breath and did exactly that. By midweek, the pressure started leaking into places it didn't belong. My sister left 3 voicemails in one afternoon, each one more emotional than the last. The first was pleading, the second accusatory, the third cold. "You're ruining everything." I didn't respond. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, reviewing years of company filings. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for patterns. And once you see patterns, you can't unsee them. There were loans taken out under the company's name that never appeared on balance sheets. Payments labeled as consulting fees that went to shell entities. Bonuses issued during years the company claimed losses. None of it was illegal on its own. Together it told a story. On Thursday, my lawyer called with a tone I hadn't heard before. Controlled excitement. They're making mistakes, she said, big ones. What kind? Defensive ones. They've started contradicting themselves. I closed my eyes. What does that mean for me? It means, she said carefully, that you're no longer just a complication. You're a threat. That night I dreamed of the dinner table again. Only this time the chairs were empty, the food untouched. My father stood at the head calling my name, but his voice echoed like he was already far away. I woke with my heart racing but my mind clear. Friday afternoon I got the call I had been expecting. My father. I want to meet, he said. No anger, no command, just restraint. Why, I asked. To clear the air? I almost laughed. That hasn't been your priority before. Silence. Then quieter, name a place. We met at a cafe halfway between our homes. Neutral territory, public. He arrived early. I arrived on time. He looked older than I remembered. Not weaker, just worn, like someone who had spent years holding something together with force instead of care. He didn't order anything, neither did I. I never meant for it to go this far, he said. I studied him. The lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw. Then why did it, I asked. He exhaled. Your grandmother was difficult. There it was, the old narrative. She didn't trust anyone, he continued. She made everything conditional, complicated. She trusted me, I said. His eyes flickered. You were supposed to be protected, he said quickly. That's what this was about. Protected from what, I asked. From responsibility, he snapped, then softened his tone. From stress. I leaned back. You mean from truth? He looked away. I did what I had to, he said. For who, I asked. For this family. I shook my head. No, you did what you had to for yourself. He leaned forward. You're forcing my hand. I didn't threaten you, I said. I asked questions. You involved lawyers? Because you involved lies. He stared at me for a long moment. What do you want? The question hung between us heavier than he realized. I want acknowledgement, I said, and I want fairness. You'll never be happy, he said bitterly. You're just like her. I smiled slightly. That's the first honest thing you've said. He stood abruptly. You think this ends well? I stood too. I think it ends truthfully. As he walked out, I noticed his hands shaking. The next morning, my sister showed up at my door again. This time she looked different, tired, raw. You won, she said flatly. I crossed my arms. This isn't a game. You always say that, she snapped. But look at what you're doing. I studied her face, the cracks in her certainty. Did you know, I asked softly. She looked away, not at first. And later, her shoulders sagged. Enough. Enough to stay quiet, I said. Enough to survive, she shot back. There it was, the difference between us. I won't stop, I said. She nodded slowly. I know. As she left, I realized something else had shifted. They weren't trying to silence me anymore. They were trying to manage the fallout. And that meant the truth was already moving beyond their control. The truth doesn't rush. It waits until the timing hurts the most. The audit entered its second phase quietly. No dramatic announcements, no confrontations, just emails, requests, follow-ups. The kind of slow pressure that makes people reveal themselves without realizing it. My lawyer warned me what would come next. They'll try to reshape the narrative, she said. When facts can't be erased, people try to soften them. She was right. It started with my mother. She showed up at my apartment one afternoon without calling. I almost didn't open the door. Almost. But some old reflex still lived in my bones. She stood there holding a bag of groceries like a peace offering. Soup ingredients. Bread. Familiar things. I thought you might not be eating properly, she said. I stepped aside. She moved through my apartment slowly, eyes lingering on details she'd never bothered to notice before. My bookshelf, the framed certificate on the wall, proof of a life she hadn't helped build. I didn't know how bad it was, she said softly. I set the bag on the counter. You knew enough. She flinched. Your father kept things from me. You let him, I replied. Her eyes filled with tears. I was trying to keep the peace. I looked at her, then really looked. The way she wrung her hands, the way her shoulders curved inward like shrinking made her easier to forgive. Peace for whom, I asked. She didn't answer. We sat at my table in silence. Finally, she spoke again. If this goes public, it will destroy him. He's already destroyed something, I said. He just didn't think it would matter. You don't understand what it's like to be married to someone like him, she whispered. I understand exactly, I said. I grew up watching you disappear. She stood abruptly, tears spilling. You're being cruel. No, I said quietly. I'm being honest. She left without another word. 2 days later, the company placed my father on temporary leave pending further review. The email circulated internally first, then externally, carefully worded, neutral, but unmistakable. Leadership transition under review. My phone buzzed nonstop. Co-workers, distant relatives, people who suddenly remembered my name. My sister called that night. He's not eating, she said. He barely sleeps. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not guilt, recognition. That didn't stop him from denying me, I replied. He's your father. And I was his daughter. She inhaled sharply. You don't have to do this. I already did, I said. She was quiet for a long moment. They're talking about the will. My heart stuttered. Who? Everyone, she said. People are asking why Grandma set it up the way she did. And what are you saying? That she didn't trust Dad. And you? Another pause. I think she said slowly she saw something coming. The next meeting with my lawyer confirmed what I'd suspected. The conditional clause had been triggered years ago. Quietly. Automatically. My father had continued operating under authority he technically no longer fully held. The realization was seismic. You understand what this means, my lawyer said. Yes, I replied. He knew. And kept going, she added. I nodded. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through my apartment, lights off, replaying every moment I'd ever felt small in that family. Every dinner, every dismissal, every subtle reminder of where I stood. It hadn't been random. It had been insurance. They kept me fed just enough to stay quiet, loved just enough to keep me unsure, excluded just enough to keep me powerless, until the night they went too far. The night they took my dinner and thought I'd swallow it like everything else. On Friday, I received a formal request to attend a board review as a named beneficiary. My hands shook as I read it. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was consequence. That evening, my father called one last time. I never thought you'd turn on me, he said. I closed my eyes. I didn't turn on you. I stopped turning away. You're enjoying this, he accused. No, I said, I'm surviving it. You could still stop, he said. You could protect us. Who protected me, I asked. Silence. I taught you strength, he said weakly. You taught me silence, I replied. I taught myself courage. I hung up and felt something lift from my chest. At the board review, I sat across from people who had only known me as an abstract possibility, a contingency, a name on paper. By the end of the meeting, they knew me as a presence. As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a message from my sister. If things had been different, would you have spared him? I typed back slowly. If things had been different, we wouldn't be here. That night, I stood in my kitchen and realized the truth I had avoided for so long. The hardest part of justice isn't the confrontation. It's accepting that some people would rather lose everything than admit they were wrong. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes after you stop being afraid. It isn't the loneliness of abandonment. It's the quiet that follows clarity, the kind that settles in when you finally understand exactly who people are and who they are not willing to be for you. The morning after the board review, I woke before my alarm. My phone was silent. No threats, no apologies, no attempts to negotiate. The calm felt earned. At work, my manager called me into his office. He shut the door carefully, like privacy suddenly mattered more than it ever had before. I didn't know, he said, sitting across from me. About your family. You weren't supposed to, I replied. He nodded. There may be opportunities coming, if things shift the way they're expected to. I understood what he meant. Power changes how people see your potential. Let's wait, I said. I want things settled first. That surprised him? It surprised me too. I wasn't in a hurry anymore. That afternoon, the news broke quietly. Not a headline, just a business column mention, an investigation, a governance review, a respected founder's legacy under reconsideration. My grandmother's name appeared. My father's did not. That omission said everything. My mother called that evening. I don't recognize him, she said, voice hollow. He's angry all the time. He blames everyone. I stirred a pot of soup on my stove. Steam rose slowly, steadily. Has he apologized? I asked. She hesitated. He says you forced this. I turned the burner down. Then he hasn't learned anything. She started crying again. I'm scared. For him, I asked. For all of us. I closed my eyes. I was scared for years. She whispered my name. I'm not your shield, I said gently. I never was. After we hung up, I sat at the table and ate slowly, fully, without guilt. 2 days later, my sister asked to meet. We chose a park near my apartment. Neutral ground again. She arrived late. Her eyes were tired, her posture less certain than it used to be. They're cutting him out, she said, sitting down heavily. The board, the advisors. They're correcting, I replied. She let out a bitter laugh. That's a nice way to say it. We sat in silence for a moment, watching leaves fall. Autumn had arrived without asking permission. You knew about the clause, I said finally. She nodded. After Grandma died. And you didn't tell me. I was scared, she said. He told me you'd ruin everything if you found out. I looked at her. Did you believe him? Yes, she admitted, because it was easier than believing he was wrong. I nodded. That at least was honest. They're talking about restructuring, she continued, splitting assets, selling parts of the company. And you, I asked. She shrugged. I don't know who I am without him backing me. I studied her face. For the first time, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a mirror of what I might have become if I'd stayed. "You could build something," I said, "like I did." She shook her head. "You were always stronger." "No," I corrected. "I was always hungrier." She winced. "I don't mean food," I added. "I mean dignity." She looked away. "Do you hate me?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said, "but I don't trust you." That hurt her more than anger would have. "Can we start over?" she asked. I stood. "Maybe someday, not today." She nodded, accepting more than I expected. The following week, the official notice arrived. My father was permanently removed from his position. The conditions of the will were enacted in full. The legacy my grandmother built was no longer his to control. I didn't celebrate, I didn't cry. I breathed. That night, I dreamed again. This time, my grandmother sat at the table with me. 2 plates. Enough food for both of us. "You stayed," she said. I woke with a strange sense of peace. The final message came from my father 3 days later. "You could have stopped this." I typed back once. "You could have fed me." Then I blocked the number. Because revenge isn't about destruction. It's about refusing to starve yourself so others can feast. The fallout didn't explode. It seeped. That was the part no one warned you about. After the power shifts, after the truth surfaces, after the names change on doors and letterheads, life doesn't pause to acknowledge what you survived. It keeps moving. Quietly. Indifferently. The company announced a restructuring plan the following week. Carefully phrased, forward-looking, emphasizing stability and continuity. My grandmother's name appeared again, this time framed as a visionary whose safeguards had protected the organization from long-term harm. I read the statement twice. They still wouldn't say my father's name. At work, people treated me differently. Not openly, not dramatically, just a little more carefully. Conversations paused when I approached. Compliments came with qualifiers. "You handled that well. You must be very strong." Strong. The word followed me like a shadow. One afternoon, I found myself staring at my reflection in the restroom mirror. I looked the same face, same posture, same faint line between my brows that appeared when I was thinking too hard. But something in my eyes had changed. I wasn't asking to be seen anymore. I already was. The call from the estate lawyer came on a Wednesday morning. "There are personal items your grandmother set aside for you," he said. "She specified they be released only after certain conditions were met." "Which conditions?" I asked. He paused. "After you stood alone." I swallowed. The next day, I drove to the old house where my grandmother had lived before moving in with my parents. It had been vacant for years, preserved like a time capsule. Dusty, still, familiar. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and old books. The lawyer unlocked a small office at the back of the house. Inside was a single box and a sealed envelope. The box held photographs, letters, mementos from a life she had never fully shared with anyone else, not even her children. The envelope was addressed to me. I sat on the floor and opened it with trembling hands. She wrote about watching me grow up, about seeing how I absorbed neglect quietly, how I learned to make myself small to survive. She wrote about my father's hunger for control and my sister's hunger for approval. She wrote about guilt. "I didn't step in sooner," she admitted. "I thought time would soften him. I was wrong." At the end of the letter, one line was underlined twice. "If they ever deny you a place at the table, remember this. It was never because you didn't deserve it." I pressed the papers to my chest and cried for the first time since the dinner. Not from pain, from release. That evening, my mother called again. "I found something," she said, voice shaking. "In the attic." I closed my eyes. "What kind of something?" "Your grandmother's journals," she whispered. "Your father didn't know they were there." My pulse quickened. "What do they say?" She hesitated. That she planned to remove him sooner. That she stayed because she was afraid of tearing the family apart. I let out a slow breath, and now my mother said, "I see that staying didn't save anything." There was a long pause. "I should have fed you," she said finally. The apology landed heavier than anything else had. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I can't pretend anymore," she said. "Because I'm tired of choosing comfort over truth." I didn't forgive her in that moment, but I heard her. 2 days later, I received an invitation to the house again. Not from my father, from my mother. Just us, no dinner. I went. She looked smaller somehow. The house felt different without his presence. Quieter, less tense. She handed me a box of my childhood things she had kept. School projects, photos, cards I had written her that she never responded to. "I kept them," she said, "even when I didn't show it." I nodded. We sat in the living room where so many conversations had died before they were spoken. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "You don't fix it," I replied. "You live differently." She nodded slowly. As I left, she hugged me. Awkward, careful, real. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the box from my grandmother beside me, and understood something that had taken me years to learn. Closure doesn't come from winning. It comes from knowing you didn't abandon yourself to keep the peace. Outside, the city hummed on. Inside, for the first time, I felt whole. But peace, I would soon learn, has a way of attracting one last challenge. And it was already on its way. Peace never arrives alone. It brings questions with it. From other people, from yourself, from the parts of your life that were built around survival instead of choice. 2 weeks after my visit with my mother, the company announced the interim board. My name appeared on the list. Not as a figurehead, not as a courtesy, as an observer with authority. I read the email 3 times before it settled into my body. This wasn't what I had planned. I hadn't planned anything beyond survival, beyond truth. But life has a way of offering you the next step only after you stop begging for it. My sister called that night. I heard she said. Yes, I replied. So it's official. For now. She exhaled slowly. People are asking about you. I smiled faintly. They weren't before. That's not fair, she said automatically, then stopped herself. Actually, maybe it is. There was progress in that pause. I don't know where I fit anymore, she admitted. I leaned back on my couch, staring at the ceiling. You get to figure that out, like everyone else. I never had to, she said quietly. I didn't respond. Some realizations need space. The first board meeting was uneventful on the surface. Polite introductions, careful language, strategic optimism, but beneath it all, I felt something shift. People listened when I spoke, not because of my last name, because I was prepared. After the meeting, one of the senior advisors pulled me aside. Your grandmother was formidable, he said. You remind me of her. I took that in without deflecting it. That evening, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject, your father. I didn't open it immediately. I already knew what it would contain. Explanation, justification. A version of remorse shaped like self-pity. When I finally read it, I wasn't surprised. He wrote about pressure, expectations, fear of losing everything he'd built. He wrote about how my independence made him feel irrelevant, how my refusal to need him felt like rejection. He didn't write the words I was waiting for. I'm sorry. I closed the message and archived it. Not deleted, archived. Some things don't need a response, but they deserve to be remembered exactly as they are. That weekend, my mother invited me to dinner again. This time she asked what I wanted to eat. I chose something simple. We cooked together, slowly, carefully. There were awkward silences, small missteps, but there was food, enough of it. And for the first time, no one was keeping score. I told your father I need space, she said as we ate. I looked up. How did he take that? Poorly, she admitted. But I'm learning that his reactions aren't my responsibility. I nodded. That took me a long time, too. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Tentative. Grateful. I should have chosen you more, she said. You can start now, I replied. That night I walked home instead of driving. The air was cool. The city lights softened by distance. I thought about the woman I had been before the dinner that started everything. The woman who would have apologized. The woman who would have blamed herself for being hungry. She felt like someone I used to know. On Monday morning, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a single object, my grandmother's serving spoon, the same one my father had slapped my hand away from. Tucked beneath it was a note in my sister's handwriting. I thought you should have this. I don't want to inherit things that were never meant for me. I sat down on the floor and laughed softly, not because it was funny, because it was right. I placed the spoon in my kitchen drawer next to my own plates, my own table, my own life. The power shift was complete now, not on paper, not in boardrooms, in me. And yet something still waited ahead. Not vengeance, not justice. Choice. What I would build with the truth I had fought for, and who I would invite to sit with me. Choice is heavier than anger. Anger moves you forward on instinct. Choice asks you to slow down, to look honestly at what you've become, now that no one is pushing you from behind. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. No more threats, no more dramatic confrontations. Just adjustments, paperwork, meetings, conversations that felt unreal because they were built on transparency instead of avoidance. I attended board meetings regularly now. I didn't speak often, but when I did, people listened. Not because I was loud, because I was precise. One afternoon, an advisor asked me privately if I intended to pursue a permanent role. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. He nodded. That's usually a good sign. At night, I cooked for myself. Real meals. I set the table even when I ate alone, not out of loneliness, out of respect. That was new. My mother called less frequently, but when she did, she sounded different, lighter, as if she had stopped bracing for impact. I'm thinking of taking a trip, she said one evening, by myself. That sounds healthy, I replied. She laughed softly. I don't even know who I am without taking care of someone else's moods. You'll figure it out, I said. You always do, just quietly. There was a pause. I'm proud of you, she said. The words landed gently, not like a correction, like an offering. I accepted them. My sister and I began exchanging occasional messages. Not emotional, not intimate, just honest. She found a small job, nothing glamorous, something that required her to show up and be accountable. It's harder than I thought, she admitted. Yes, I replied, that's how you know it's yours. She didn't respond right away. Later that night, she sent a single message. Thank you for not destroying everything. I stared at the screen for a long time. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had stopped preserving what was already rotting. One afternoon, my lawyer called with an update. Your father is contesting some of the outcomes. I exhaled slowly. Of course he is. He's unlikely to succeed, she continued, but it may take time. I'm not in a hurry, I said. That surprised her. It surprised me too. After we hung up, I thought about what revenge had meant to me at the beginning. I thought it would feel sharp, triumphant, loud. It didn't. It felt quiet, clean, like finally putting down a weight you didn't realize you were carrying. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. I ran into my father at the grocery store, of all places. He looked thinner, older, smaller somehow. The authority he once carried no longer announced itself before he spoke. He froze when he saw me. So he said after a moment, "You got what you wanted." I looked at him calmly. "I got what was left when you stopped taking." He scoffed. "You think you're better than me now?" I shook my head. "I don't think about you that way anymore." That seemed to hurt more than anger would have. "I did everything for this family," he said. "No," I replied. "You did everything for control." His jaw tightened. "You could still help me." I met his eyes. "I already did. I showed you where it broke." He stared at me, searching for something he could still use. He didn't find it. As I walked away, I realized something important. Closure doesn't require reconciliation. Sometimes it requires distance. That night, I hosted dinner for the first time. Not a grand event, just a few friends, chosen family, people who knew my story without using it against me. I cooked enough food for everyone. As we sat around my table, laughing, passing dishes freely, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with victory. It had to do with belonging, not the kind you beg for, the kind you build. The last thing that changes is the way you see yourself, not how others see you. That shifts quickly when power moves. But the internal recalibration, the quiet rewriting of who you believe you are allowed to be, that takes time. Months passed. The company stabilized. The board finalized its decisions. I declined a permanent executive role and accepted an advisory position instead. Not because I couldn't do it, but because I didn't want my identity swallowed by a structure that had once tried to erase me. Choice, I learned, is freedom's final form. My father's legal challenges faded one by one, not with drama, with exhaustion. The kind that comes when you realize no one is coming to rescue the version of yourself built on denial. I heard through my mother that he had moved into a smaller place, that he spent his days reading old documents, rewriting history for an audience that no longer existed. I didn't visit. Some doors don't need to be closed loudly. They just stop opening. My mother traveled, alone. She sent postcards with short messages, learning who I am, thinking of you. No apologies, no demands, just presence. It was enough. My sister found her footing slowly, awkwardly. She failed more than once. She called me once after a particularly bad day. "I don't know how you did this," she said. "I didn't," I replied. "I survived it. There's a difference." She was quiet. "I'm sorry," she said finally. I let the silence stretch. "I believe you," I said. Forgiveness didn't rush in like a wave. It settled like sediment. Gradual, conditional, real. One evening, as winter turned toward spring, I invited my mother and sister to my apartment for dinner. I cooked. Not to prove anything, not to heal everything, just to share a meal where no one was counting portions or hierarchy. When my mother hesitated before taking a serving, I slid the bowl toward her. "Please," I said, "there's enough." She looked at me, then eyes shining, and nodded. After they left, I stood alone in my kitchen plates, drying in the rack, and felt something close to joy. Not happiness, not triumph. Alignment. The moment when your life finally reflects your values. Later that night, I took out my grandmother's serving spoon and placed it on the table. Not as a relic, as a tool. I understood now what she had been trying to teach me all along. Inheritance isn't about what you receive. It's about what you refuse to accept anymore. I thought back to that first dinner, the shock, the hunger, the way my body had gone cold with disbelief. If I could speak to that version of myself now, I would tell her this. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining things. You are not asking for too much. You are asking the wrong people. The real revenge was never exposing them. It was feeding myself. Choosing myself. building a table where no one had to earn their place through silence. On the anniversary of that dinner, I hosted another gathering. Friends, laughter, music low in the background, dishes passed freely. At one point, someone reached for the last serving of food and paused. "Is anyone else hungry?" she asked. I smiled. "Yes," I said, "and that's okay. There's more in the kitchen." Later, after everyone left, I sat alone with a cup of tea and reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the inheritance, the exclusion, the justice. They were all chapters. But they were not the ending. The ending was this moment, quiet, full, unafraid. If you've made it this far into my story, maybe you recognize pieces of yourself in it. Maybe you've sat at a table where your needs were minimized, your worth negotiated, your presence tolerated instead of welcomed. If so, hear this. You are allowed to stand up. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to build something better. And if this story resonated with you, if it stirred something you've been carrying quietly for years, I invite you to stay. Like, comment, subscribe. Not for me, for yourself. Because stories like this don't end when the screen goes dark. They begin when someone finally decides to eat.